Obviously, the question of the unity of progressive forces in Latin America has always been really crucial to the region's struggle for independence, away from the grip of US imperialism. In recent times, relations between two really key countries, Venezuela and Brazil, have been under strain in recent years. And a particularly important recent incident would be Brazil's veto against Venezuela joining BRICS. So in July of this year, it was reported, just in terms of new developments, it was reported that Venezuelan officials are reinstating tariffs ranging from 15 to 77% on Brazilian products. So how should we interpret this development? Are we seeing a further deterioration of relations between the two countries? Can you help us unpack the dynamics that are at play here, please, Francisco?
Sure. I checked this tariff thing. The reason why there is a veto against Venezuela by Brazil, I think, is got very much to do. This is my own interpretation. In terms of, what I know. I think it's being determined by the electoral coalition that Lula presides, which is very broad. I nearly said extremely. It's very broad. It's so broad that it includes people who are not very radical. My sense is that the foreign ministry of Brazil, which is called Itamaraty, which is the place where it is, basically it's a neighborhood, they have a huge amount of autonomy historically, not only with Lula, but historically, always have to determine more or less the foreign policy of Brazil, regardless of the government, which in a sense is a source of strength, but at the same time, not necessarily progressive. Nevertheless, it's been good for the country as a whole, overall, historically. And when it came to this issue of Venezuela and the election, the Itamaraty was in touch with the State Department of the United States. And I think that through that mechanism, the pressure for not recognizing the election in Venezuela last year came from. And I think Lula, in order to ensure that he maintains his coalition together, because the danger was Bolsonaro, he did this thing. If you don't recognize the government, you cannot recognize them joining the BRICS because the government you don't recognize. So it's a logical conclusion, even though it's no good. Very soon after all of that, I would say a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, the two countries began to talk to each other. I don't know the details. Of course, they're not going to let us know. And Venezuela sent an ambassador, and he was recognized by Brazil right away, which, is a recognition of the government of Venezuela anyway. And then when there was the inauguration of President Maduro on the 10th of January 2025, Brazil sent a special envoy to participate in the inauguration. And I know because I was there in the inauguration myself as one of the international guests, although a very significant one. So things have been mending between the two of them. When you asked the question of this 77%, I was shocked. I said, Jesus Christ, what is going on? And the Maduro government, from what they say publicly, they investigated this and they said it was a technical mistake. And this technical mistake was as a result that the thing is digitalized. So it's a computer system. And they apply 77% to imports from Roraima, which is, next door to Venezuela. It's a border area of Brazil with Venezuela. And they rectified it immediately. This was announced by both governments, by Brazil and Venezuela. That was a mistake, so they went back to where they were. So the problem has been sorted. Thank God.
Yeah, thank God for that. Now, turning to Venezuela and the US, in July, there was also a significant prisoner exchange between these two countries, where 10 US citizens were exchanged for 250 Venezuelan nationals, following which the announcement of the US allowing Chevron to resume production of Venezuelan crude oil. In light of the demonization of Venezuela by the United States over the past several decades and the intense economic warfare in recent years, how significant are these recent developments and why has this shift come about?
Well, I get the sense that Venezuela has a strong leverage. The whole east coast of the United States depends almost completely on Venezuelan oil. Venezuelan oil is heavy. It's quite heavy and it requires a special refining processing. And Venezuela was the owner of something like 6,000 petrol stations in the east coast of the United States, including own 3 refineries that Venezuela in the past installed in the east coast of the United States. And you cannot really refine any other oil except that one, because the amount of investment it will require for you to do it is huge. So this has been going on for some time. This goes back even to Biden. Biden suspended the application of the sanction for 6 months, and then Chevron came in and produced oil and so on. Now, there was a point when the United States were saying, we're not paying you because you're a rogue country. And Venezuela said, no oil. So Venezuela insisted before they literally put the oil in a tanker on the coast, the United States, whoever it was, have to come to the coast and pay, literally, and then they could take the oil. So this has been going on for a while, and because of that dependency, and this is the same with Trump. It's not the first time that Trump allows Chevron to continue operating. Special licenses are called, which extend the sanction for that particular company and for that country for that period. They do it every six months. I don't think that's the only reason, but that's one important reason since you asked that in the question. But I think it's more important that Venezuela engaged in a massive international campaign in Latin America regarding what they call human trafficking that Bukele and Trump engage in by sending people to these high security prisons, second, which is called concentration camp, literally, in El Salvador. And Bukele is paid for the amount of prisoners that he gets. So it's human trafficking of the worst kind, violating every imaginable principle, not only of their own constitutions, but also international law in every possible way. And Venezuela was making the life of Bukele very, very tough. And I don't understand, or I don't know the details of the conversations, but some of the key people who were participating in delegations, being in the negotiations with Trump and company, made it clear that unless 252 were released, then something is not going to happen. And as part of the bargaining was, they took away 10. This is a huge victory politically for Venezuela, gigantic. And Bukele did not want to release the prisoners. And he was told by the United States, indicating exactly why he's doing what he's doing. He's a vassal, he's a lackey of the United States, and it's really a brutal one. And he was told even the Venezuela have to take 2 planes in order to get to 252. And I see the images of these people coming back into Venezuela. They were absolutely delighted. The stories that they tell of brutality and daily beatings, 3 times a day, all of them. The quality of the food was disgustingly horrible deliberately. And then plenty more. I mean, there are some horror stories which I don't think I should tell you that they told on national television in Venezuela. So this is absolutely extraordinary. Now, the normalization, which I think is part of the question, will there be normalization in the relation between the United States and Venezuela? I think the answer is no. One thing is to be practical about business, which is what the United States is forced to do, and therefore is forced to comply. Venezuela can sell its oil somewhere else easily. And the reason why Venezuela continues to sell oil to the United States, we say, no, sell your East Coast. I couldn't care less. But if the Venezuela were to do that, it will be deemed to be an act of war by the United States. So therefore, Venezuela doesn't, fall into that trap. Nevertheless, Venezuela could sell it totally easily. But the reason why there won't be is because the State Department secretary, the state secretary, is called Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio is absolutely determined, whatever influence he can wield on the question of foreign relations with Venezuela, Cuba, and so on, he will do it. And exactly as it happened. Not only there was the deal with the prisoners and Chevron and all the rest of it, which you mentioned, Venezuela had an election on the 27th, 2 days ago, massive wins for the Chavistas. Out of 335 majorities, the Chavistas got 285. So it's massive. And then what does Rubio does? He doesn't recognize the result. He calls Venezuela all sorts of names, and so therefore no normalization. So from the point of view of Maduro, he said, I'm quite prepared to have normal relations with Trump. I even have a conversation with him, but it depends on them. If they don't want to, they don't want to. But if they do, we're ready.